Chapter 12. Bubba opened the door to Charlie's, the small family-run sandwich shop just a few blocks from the police station. Charlie's had been one of his go-to restaurants when he had worked at the fire station, and he was glad to see they were still in business. The traditional lunch crowd packed the interior, and Bubba scanned the area as he waited. He wished they had more information on the arsonist. With so much ambiguity, he couldn't help wondering if anyone in this room could be the suspect. Would he know it if he spoke to them? Would the killer give off some creepy vibe or feel? "Can I help you?" Bubba glanced up and realized the line had moved without him, and the cashier was waiting for him to order. He didn't recognize the woman, and he wondered if Charlie and Darla still owned the place. They had been the sweetest couple, always making time to circle the room and ask about the food, or life in general. Charlie would sometimes even pull out a chair and sit with patrons, until Darla good-naturedly ushered him back to work. He would hate to hear they no longer ran the place. Stepping up, he placed his order and handed over the money. She took it and handed him a receipt as if it were the most normal thing in the world. He had almost forgotten that feeling. The stares and whispers as he passed had become so common that when they didn't happen, it felt odd. When his name was called, he grabbed the food and made his way toward the front door. But before he reached it, a hand landed on his arm. He whirled to see who had touched him and found himself face to face with Daphne. "Hey, Matt," she said in her soft, flirty voice. "I was hoping I would run into you again. I know we never got a chance in high school, but I thought maybe we could do dinner or lunch." Bubba forced his face to remain impassive, but the thought of having dinner with Daphne ranked about as high as watching paint dry in his book. He had a feeling it might be about as intellectually stimulating as well. "I don't know if I'll have time as I'm helping Captain Drake out, but if I do, I'll let you know." Her smile faltered for a moment and a cloud passed over her eyes, but then she brightened again. "Sure, sounds good. You know where to find me." "That I do. Good to see you again, Daphne." "You too. Be careful out there," she called to him as he opened the door. He turned back to her, the choice of her words stopping him in his tracks. But she had already turned away and was stepping up to the counter. What had she meant by that? Did she know something about these murders? Or was that just something she said? As quickly as it was gone, the unease returned, and Bubba returned to the prayer he'd uttered the day before. He hoped they found the killer soon. This constant state of uncertainty was wearing on him. He opened the door and nearly collided with Davis Redman. Davis had been a fellow firefighter, but Bubba had never been close to him. There always appeared to be a current of anger brimming just under his surface. "Well, if it isn't Matt Fisher back from the dead." Bubba flinched slightly at the hatred that assaulted him with Davis's words. "Davis, good to see you again." "Is it?" He folded his beefy arms across his chest and leaned back. "We had a funeral for you, you know? Dress uniforms and all. Your picture hangs on the wall with the other firefighters who actually lost their lives in a fire. Guess we can take that down now, huh?" Bubba could feel his own temper rising. Normally cool-headed, this guy was pushing all the right buttons. "Look, Davis, I didn't ask to be targeted, and if I hadn't thought my family was in danger, I wouldn't have left. I'm sure if you had been in my position, you would have done the same thing." Bubba had no idea if the man even had family or if he was close to them, but he had to assume there was decency in Davis somewhere, even though something had clearly happened to make him fixate on the negative so much. "That's where you're wrong." Davis leaned forward, and for a moment Bubba thought he was going to poke him in the chest. "I would have stayed and found the person responsible. Stopping them is the only real way to protect your family." "Then I guess we'll have to agree to disagree, Davis." Bubba was careful to keep his voice even. Clearly, Davis was agitated at him, but getting in a fight was not something he wanted to do. He hadn't seen Natasha, the dogmatic reporter, today, but if she truly were watching his every move, the last thing he needed to do was hit anyone, even someone who might deserve it. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to the police station. Captain Drake and I are working hard to find the killer so that no one else has to go through what I, or my family, did." Before Davis could say another word, Bubba stepped around him and continued to the police station. He couldn't help wondering if his other firefighter brothers felt the same way as Davis, though. A part of him wanted to go to the firehouse and apologize, and the other part of him felt that might just make the situation worse. "I don't know why you brought me back here, Lord, but I sure hope something good comes out of it," Bubba said under his breath as he pulled open the door to the police station. "Hey, you okay?" Makenna asked as he entered her office with the food. "Yeah." He set the bag down on her desk. "I just had a run-in with a guy from my past. He was pretty angry that I faked my death. I guess I never realized people might be mad. I just thought they would understand the reasoning." She rose from her chair and crossed to the space in front of him. "Bubba, I wish I had the words to make everything better. I know that everything you are going through right now is my fault, and I just..." She shook her head as if her words had run out mid-sentence. Her bottom lip folded under her top teeth, and for the first time since he'd known her, a sense of vulnerability floated around her. He placed a hand on her arm and forced it to stay there, and not wander up to her dark hair, which fell to her shoulders today. "It's no use living in the past, Makenna. We have to focus on today and finding the killer." Her eyes met his, and every nerve in his body tingled. He wanted to kiss her, to take her in his arms and forget their current predicament for just a moment. But before he could, Natasha's voice carried across the room. "Now this will make a great headline. Captain Drake fails to find the killer because she's too busy canoodling with the victim who got away." She lowered her iPhone and flashed her predatory smile at them. Bubba dropped his hand from Makenna's arm, but not before he felt her tense. "What are you doing here, Natasha?" Makenna's voice was cool but professional. "I came to see if you had a comment about the most recent death, but clearly you're too busy to be doing your actual job." "That's enough," Bubba said. "Makenna has been working tirelessly to find this killer." "Bubba, please," Makenna said, cutting him off. She shot him a look that said she appreciated his help, but could defend herself, at least in this situation. Then she turned back to Natasha. "I appreciate your doggedness on this case, Natasha, but you know I can't discuss details of the case with you. What you can tell your readers is that we are doing everything we can to catch this guy, and that if the public wants to help, they can be vigilant watchers and report anything suspicious." "I'll be sure to do that, Captain Drake. But you should remember that a picture's worth 1,000 words." She waved her phone as a reminder. "I'll see myself out." "That woman is a piece of work," Bubba said when he was sure Natasha was gone. "She is," Makenna said with a sigh, "but she's also right. Perception is everything, and I need to make sure that the town believes we are doing everything we can. The last thing I need is a vigilante on my hands trying to take matters into his own hands, because he thinks we aren't doing enough." "Of course," Bubba said, but he caught her unsaid words. They couldn't be seen in a compromised position like that again. Even though nothing had happened, they needed to be careful to keep their relationship strictly professional. "I take it you had no luck then?" Makenna ran a hand through her hair as she walked back to the other side of the desk. "None. She's clean. I don't know what I'm missing, Bubba." "I don't either. But I know when I get stuck that praying often helps." He took her sandwich out and set it in front of her. "You're a believer too?" she asked, looking up at him. "I am. I think I always believed in God. My parents took us to church every Sunday. But I don't think I had a relationship with him until I left here. When I ended up in Fire Beach and had to start over, that's when he really took a hold of me. How about you?" "Kind of the same," she said as she unwrapped her sandwich. "I learned to lean on him when I couldn't solve the case 5 years ago. Sometimes he's all that keeps me going." "You never wanted a family?" Bubba hoped he wasn't being too personal as he pulled up a chair and sat across from her. "Never had time for one, I guess, but I think about it." The look she gave him as she spoke sent his heart thumping in his chest. His brain understood they had agreed to remain professional, but he hadn't felt his heart move like this in a long time. Was he falling for Makenna? Makenna stared at the information in the report and tried not to think about the almost kiss with Bubba. He had been about to kiss her. She knew it, could see it in his eyes, and she'd wanted him to. At least until Natasha had shown up and ruined everything. She had a knack for that. But Makenna couldn't blame Natasha this time. She was asking what everyone else wanted to know. When was she going to find this killer and put a stop to him? Besides, it wasn't Natasha's fault that Makenna was sitting here with a stomach full of conflicting emotions. No, that was completely her fault. She shouldn't have told Bubba they needed to stay strictly professional. They did, at least until this case was over. But now she was afraid he'd taken her words to mean she had no interest in him. And that was about as far from the truth as one could get. Since she'd driven to Fire Beach to get him, her mind had warred between thoughts of the killer and thoughts of Bubba. She had tried convincing herself that the thoughts of him were just feelings of remorse for his lost years. But she knew that wasn't true. Thoughts of remorse wouldn't have her imagining what his hands would feel like on her neck, in her hair, and they certainly wouldn't have her imagining what his lips might feel like pressed against her own. But she'd had to go and ruin it. Now she had her feelings for him, along with feelings of guilt for making him think she didn't care, along with her feelings of failure at not catching the killer. To put it mildly, she was a hot mess. She chanced to glance at him from the corner of her eye as she chewed on the sandwich he had brought her. She hadn't told him how much she enjoyed salami, so she was surprised he had returned with an Italian sandwich for her. He was definitely surprising. And dedicated. His eyes were focused on the paper in front of him as well. He'd offered to help her go through the list of Dustin's clients as they ate. And though she could have had Tad or Kelsey do it, she'd agreed. She enjoyed spending time with him, even if it was searching for a killer, and she knew she would miss it when he was gone. Gone. She needed to keep reminding herself of that fact, too. When this case ended, he would probably return to Fire Beach, and then where would she be? Alone. Again. Makenna hadn't meant to marry her work, but it had sort of happened. In the beginning, she had thrown herself into the job in order to learn and prove herself, but then the case 5 years ago had happened. When everyone else had left, she quickly climbed the ladder, and once she made captain, she rarely had time for anything else, or anyone else. Still, she couldn't deny the feelings. She hoped one day to find someone she could share evenings and weekends with, someone she could take to church, and someone who could listen when she needed to process cases. She could see Bubba filling that role in her life, but she knew that wasn't reality. When this case ended, he would return to his life, and her life would continue here. "What?" he asked, catching her staring at him. Heat filled her face. "Nothing. I was just thinking it's been nice having you here." He smiled at her. "It's been nice being here with you. I'm certainly glad I'll get to be in my family's life again, and maybe—" He trailed off and looked away as if unsure how to finish that sentence. "Maybe what?" she asked. Was he going to tell her she'd been wrong? That they could have a relationship and still solve this case? "Maybe I'll come back more often and stop in and see you." "I'd like that," she said, but that wasn't what she had been hoping to hear. She didn't know if a long-distance relationship would last, but she might be willing to try it with him. "Hey, look at this," he said, pushing his paper her direction. "This looks like a lot of denied claims, doesn't it?" Makenna stared down at the paper, but she was no insurance agent. She had no idea if these were legitimate denials or Dustin's denials that he had then pocketed. It appeared they would need more information. "Yeah, it does. We should definitely look into that." And the moment was gone. It was back to work. She shouldn't be sad. This was the life she'd chosen. But she couldn't help wondering if maybe she had made the wrong choice. Her mind wandered back to the night she had sent Bubba away. Makenna's eyes snapped open at the ringing of her phone. The clock beside her read 2 a.m. Who could be calling her at 2 a.m? There was only one answer to that question. Work. Snapping awake, she grabbed her phone and pressed the call button. "Sergeant Drake here." "Makenna, we've had another fire. I need you to get over to 232 Overside Street." The voice of her captain was firm, so even though she knew someone else had to be working the night shift, she didn't argue. 232 Overside? The address felt familiar in her head. Wait, isn't that Matt Fisher's address? Matt Fisher was a local fireman, but he was also her #1 suspect right now. He knew all of the previous victims, even if only slightly, and he understood fire. She just hadn't figured out a motive yet. But now her captain was telling her he was not the arsonist, but a victim? Yes, it is. Get over there and see if you can help determine if he set this fire himself to divert suspicion. Yes, sir. I'll be right there. She ended the call and grabbed her uniform. She had just holstered her gun when the pounding began on her front door. She peeked through the spy hole, surprised to see Matt Fisher standing on her front porch. He was clad only in shorts and a pair of tennis shoes, and he appeared out of breath. "He got my house, Drake," he said when she opened the door. "Now do you believe I'm not your suspect?" For a moment, she wasn't sure what to believe. Was this part of his elaborate plan? It seemed crazy, but then he would have to be crazy to be starting fires like this. However, when she looked in his eyes, something in her knew that he was innocent. She stepped back and opened the door for him. "Come inside and tell me what happened." As he stepped past her, she scanned the area for anyone who might have followed him, but the neighborhood seemed to sleep on around them. She shut the door and turned to Matt. What if, instead of telling him to run that night, she had worked with him then? Would they have ended up together? She didn't know, but the one thing she did know was that she couldn't live in the past. Those decisions were made and done. She could only move forward from here.